Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Reasonable Doubt, brought to you by the Harris County Criminal Lawyers Association. I'm your host, Jimmy Ardwan. I'm without my co-host this week. He is off watching this soccer game. I don't even know what that's about. Man United something? I don't know. I don't follow soccer, but that's where he is. So I'm flying solo tonight, but I got a great panel of guests with me. I got Ram Mincer. Ram, thanks for joining us on the program.
Good evening. Thank you. My pleasure.
Absolutely. I also got Christopher Carlson, my cohort in crime earlier this year in a long federal trial, and Mark Metzger. Mark, thanks for joining us.
Good to be here.
You guys get the honor of handling this program with me. We're going to have a hard time doing it, I know, without Julio around and all of his, UT references, his soccer references that we won't understand, but we wish him well tonight. It's his birthday present, so we hope you have fun, Julio, but we'll keep the fort down for you. We got a bunch of great topics to get to tonight. We're going to open up the phone lines about 8:30. 713-807-1794 is the number. You can get in on this conversation. We also have Twitter up at HCCLA_TV, so you can tweet us your questions and comments as well. Guys, the juice is loose. He gets paroled today. I know I didn't prep you guys for that, but but I don't think anybody really saw that one. I mean, we heard about it. I really didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't understand the full thing about how like a fly here in the studio flying around. Oh well. Didn't know how the Nevada system worked in terms of parole, but he got a 33-year sentence. After 9 years, he came up, and they let him out. Now, I'm not so much surprised by this. Apparently, he did everything he was supposed to do, and we got a guest, another guest.
Oh no, I've been watching it fly around your head.
I know, everybody's enamored by it. But he did what he was supposed to do in this crime. The thing that keeps coming around, and everybody wants to keep coming back to the murder. I mean, OJ, that's what this is all about. And I think, for me, I felt like when he got sentenced on the robbery case the first time, that there was a twinge of retribution over the murder acquittal.
Well, funny you mentioned that. I was listening to the radio this morning. There was actually one thing we forgot, that before he got involved in this debacle, he actually wrote a book that I can't remember the exact title, but the premise was,
If I Did It.
What if I
Right.
killed my wife? And apparently that they thought that had quite a blowback and a negative effect on the jury.
Yeah, I don't think that this, look, that was literally the trial of the century. In terms of just the coverage, it was the first real trial that was covered 24/7 in the media. And so I don't think, regardless of the fact that this was a robbery case, the fact that it's just not even related to that, the stigma of OJ, I don't think will ever go away.
No, it was what, 96, 97 when that trial happened?
95,
like
I think.
It was 95?
Right.
Yeah, I was in college when that was going on. I remember watching it on TV. I think they interrupted the NBA Finals or something along those lines for that.
The Bronco chase.
Yeah, for the Bronco chase. So yeah, it's no surprise that he got nailed for the robbery stuff. I mean, he had to pay. That was it. It was a trial tax.
Yeah. So the other thing that strikes me about this that I try to always tell other lawyers, especially younger lawyers, is that this from not just the Bronco chase and the trial and the civil case, but everything that happened after that, he is truly a case study of our justice system, in that you saw elements of everything. I mean, I don't know if you guys have watched the 30 for 30 on ESPN about the OJ trial. I mean, you look at what's happened and how it affected race relations following on the heels of Rodney King, and how a lot of people felt that they had an urban jury who was getting retribution for the verdict in Rodney King. I mean, there was so much around this, not just the fact that he was a pro football player charged with murder, but it happened in LA at the time when there was really bad race relations. And so you look at everything and people want to throw that in there, but I also look at the trial itself and say, this was a textbook case of reasonable doubt. For everybody to study.
It was a textbook case of reasonable doubt. And I think one thing that was interesting and the most historic about it, because how many times does someone have the financial wherewithal to go toe-to-toe with the government in that type of case? And additionally, that was almost historic in the fact, when has an African American ever had that type of firepower to go toe-to-toe with the government and hold their own? Especially since, I mean, it's been almost an underlying, no one talks about it, but in the system, if you don't have finances to pay for your, and I think there's some great appointed attorneys, but to pay for your experts and everything you need, you're not going to do as well as those who are well-heeled.
Well, I mean, for decades, and we've been carping on it on this show forever about our bail system. And the fact
bond.
that
Absolutely.
if you can't even afford to get out, your chances of being able to defend yourself go way down. And here is a guy that had the unlimited resources, basically, to fight the state on a murder charge. And so I just, you know, a lot of people are out there saying, why are we still talking about this guy? Why are we still talking about this case?
I think it's also a good example of why in trial, at least in Texas, we are not allowed, or they are not allowed to talk about a defendant's prior criminal history, prior, you know, to that trial. This is exactly why, to avoid that assumption of guilt and the prejudice that comes along with it. And even recently with the new case law coming down this year, where the states can start, something as simple as misdemeanor DWI, you know, your second offense, they can talk about usually it wasn't until felony, because obviously we're in felony for a reason, but now it's even trickled down to the misdemeanor. And there are a lot of great cases for trial that people are just taking guilty pleas and they're taking convictions because they're afraid if the jury's going to hear about the first one, they're naturally going to think I did the second. And, you know, I've got a lot of cases like that on doc, and I think this is a clear example of the harm that obviously, you know, a big case like this, you can't, you know, get around that. But,
Well, and OJ's such the outlier or anomaly, if you will, because a lot of ways to correct perhaps a high publicity case is to transfer the venue, right? If you got a locally high publicity case, you're worried about a tainted jury pool, you transfer the case. I mean, where the hell is OJ going to go that nobody knows about his background?
Yeah, he can't. Absolutely. There was no place to go.
No.
Yeah.
No, so I mean,
there's a district up in Alaska somewhere
yeah, up at the Arctic Circle.
where they don't have television.
I mean, for all the fanfare this got, it is going to be even more of a spectacle when he's actually released in October. I'm sure we'll talk about that, and you know, I'm interested to see what happens. There was somebody posted and said, leading up to this, that Vegas was taking odds on whether or not he would be released. And I said, well, hell, I don't want odds on that, because that looks like a pretty foregone conclusion. I want odds about whether or not he's going to violate the terms of his parole, you know, and see what those odds are.
I don't know, because right after the verdict where he was acquitted, he basically he was very much under the radar. I believe he has 3 retirements.
Right.
Any money he makes above and beyond that goes to the victims for the civil case.
The Goldmans.
So I just think that he will pretty much he'll be playing golf here and there and just kind of living out his last days quietly.
He should. That's what he should do. All right, enough about OJ. Let's talk about our Attorney General for a little bit here. What a week. You know, I thought we had really seen the worst of him with the, you know, everything he had done up to this point, and then now this asset forfeiture deal comes out where he wants to roll back all the Obama and Holder memos and legislation curtailing asset forfeiture without a criminal conviction. Unbeknownst to me, that we were going to have this whole storm today about Trump saying he wouldn't hire him and all that, but that has nothing to do with what I want to talk about, which is this asset forfeiture memo that came out. Essentially, Jeff Sessions wants to curtail and roll back all the executive memorandums that came out under Obama and his AG Holder, which said you cannot take people's assets if you don't have a criminal case pending. Now that upset a lot of local DAs and police departments because they relied upon the seizure of those funds in order to pay for a lot of things.
And margarita parties, for example.
Exactly. I mean, those are important, right? They boost morale. And so now he wants to go back to the days of being able to take people's assets with no criminal charges. It's just insane. It's absolutely insane that we're going to go back to this after we are now moving to a point where we're back to we're going to be tough on crime, even though we have no criminal charges.
You know what though? He's really not going back to anything because they're already doing that. I mean, I have a client right now up in Montgomery County who has not been charged with any crime at all. They raided the house, they seized guns and cash and whatnot, and there is a civil forfeiture pending right now. He still has not been charged. We believe the charges are coming, of course, but there's no charges right now, and we've already had to file an answer and whatnot in this civil case in order to preserve his rights with the money and the guns.
And I don't think people understand how broad the Texas forfeiture law is, in that all the state of Texas has to prove by a preponderance of the evidence is that you violated a criminal statute in this state, another state, or federal jurisdiction. They get to basically prove up, even if it's not codified within the Texas Penal Code, they can seek to forfeit your assets. I mean, that just seems like an inherently unfair standard.
Absolutely. They come in and guerrilla style tactics, guns drawn, and they take all your stuff from you, never put you in handcuffs, never arrest you, and then serve you with papers within a very short period of time, and now you're sitting there with nothing, none of your assets. You have nothing anymore. They can take it all.
And now you're also placed in the Hobson's choice of, they've taken my property, there probably is a criminal investigation.
Do I give up my assets and hope they go away, or do I answer the lawsuit and then risk them filing criminal charges against me?
Or even better, do I risk answering discovery, sitting for a deposition, not invoking my Fifth Amendment in order to try and protect my property rights, and having them use whatever answers I give against me in a criminal proceeding? It's a double-edged sword for people.
Yeah, absolutely.
What advice do you give people in this situation? Silence. I've stumped the panel.
No, I mean, it's very hard because obviously, I mean, anyone who's handled a forfeiture case that parallels a criminal case, you have to invoke the Fifth Amendment, no matter how much money or whatever the property is. And if someone has criminal exposure, unfortunately, they're going to have to give that stuff up. And I mean, it's going to be like one of those federal investigations where they end up with perjury. I mean, a criminal matter may not even arise, and they give a false statement or something that's not true. And I mean, that they could end up, I mean, there's a million and one ways to hang yourself. But I think as far as Jeff Sessions goes, if we come back 2 years from now, I mean, this is going to be the least of the draconian things he does.
Assuming he doesn't get fired.
Good point, yes.
And that's even, I mean, you're also assuming that we even know about a lot of these things. I mean, that study that came out, I think it was the Institute for Justice, they had talked about, I think it's an advocacy law firm group that represents people that are victims of this, and they said only 1/6 of these cases, these asset forfeiture cases, ever even are heard of. And out of those, there's like over 50% are found to have some issues. But then that goes back to what Rand was saying earlier about people's means to hire an attorney or be able to fight this. A lot of the little money or assets that they had to hire a lawyer or to find adequate counsel for this is gone. They leave them with absolutely nothing. And so we're looking at 5/6 of these asset forfeiture. They're not even litigated. They're not even contested. And the stuff that goes back to that is just the bully system. They come in there, guns drawn, bully you, take everything, and you just sit there and shut up because you feel you have nowhere to go.
Well, and one of the things I'm interested to see, because Colorado, Washington were the first states to legalize marijuana. Now there's, I think Nevada, California has some variant of it. I think Oregon has. We're seeing more and more states. And you see kind of the beginnings of it in Texas, right? DPS is already taking applications for dispensary licenses online. So clearly the beginning of that is in place. With this, it sets up a true federal versus state issue wherein you could have a dispensary in Colorado, let's say, who's legally making money pursuant to Colorado law, and the feds come in and seize their assets and don't charge them with a crime, but say, well, we believe you violated federal law, or, for instance, if it was the Texas standard, they could say, well, you violated Kansas law, your neighboring state, by doing this. And I mean, it's just you could really you can see the setup here almost coming down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. No, the other issue though is they're talking about going hard on marijuana again. Mm-hmm. So are they going to start rolling back and repealing these state laws?
Well, that's another good question, because what he's done really is he's also instituted we're going to charge the highest crime possible in the federal system. He's basically issued that memo. I want you to find the highest crime possible. Mandatory minimums, don't go below it unless there's good reason. And even then, I mean, he's really coming back to, as you called it, Rand, this draconian system that we saw that put a bunch of people in prison for crack cocaine in the 80s.
And what did he compare it to? He just gave a speech where he was discussing marijuana, and I think he compared it to heroin or the opioid crisis,
right,
or something like that, something that was just an incredible jump.
Yeah, and what I saw this past week with the roundup of these healthcare fraud, although it was labeled an opioid raid, mm-hmm, it was a healthcare fraud, with the opioid moniker on it, because that's their new war on drugs. They basically use the healthcare fraud task force, strike force that they have set up to go after these pain management clinics, these home health care agencies that are dispensing the opioids, that are dispensing all the prescription medications, and that's become their new war on drugs. Is really the dispensing of opioids now. It's an interesting dynamic, because to me it is what didn't happen with and I saw some people predicting that this may be the next wave, and Rand, you may be able to speak on this because I think you have some experience in the plaintiffs world, but this may be the next fight for plaintiffs lawyers in going after drug manufacturers too, a la what they did with the tobacco companies.
Except for when they were going after tobacco, everyone missed under the radar that the food industry was working out all types of deals where they would basically be exempted from this type of lawsuit. And if you notice, of all the things that Trump is talking about, they always try to tack on to some of this legislation is, especially with healthcare, is medical malpractice and tort reform.
Right.
So I think it's not going to be much of a stretch, and I have not read any of these laws that take away coverage from 20, 30, up to 100 million people, depending on what it is, but I'm sure somewhere in there it has some type of limitation for pharmaceuticals. Limitation of liability, if not complete exemption.
Probably. I just don't know. This is the word. We actually had somebody, when I first started hosting this show, somebody called in and said, well, we've heard about citizens arrest, and it always stuck with me. What about citizens asset forfeiture? And I said, no such thing exists. You can't really do it. But you can. You can.
It's called theft.
Exactly. Exactly. But I mean, the interesting thing here is, what's the real difference? What's the real difference between what they're trying to do here, and if you just went and took somebody's stuff and you got accused by theft?
Well, the difference is
you got the G label?
Well, they have the legal right to do it. That's the difference.
Because they got a memo from this guy.
Yeah, they've got the legal right to come in and seize all of your stuff. It's ridiculous. And there's no standard for it. They believe that it is the proceeds of or used in the commission of, boom, gone. They get to seize it. And now you have to fight to get it back.
And you're in that Hobson's choice of, do I actually fight for it, or do I, hedge my bets and protect myself from a criminal case that may or may not come?
Well, I mean, and I haven't done a Harris County one for a long time, but it used to be that you could settle a Harris County forfeiture case for $2,500. That was just their number. Was $2,500. No matter how much money was taken or otherwise, $2,500, settle. Now you don't have to ask any questions. You don't have to do any discovery. You'll get $2,500 back. Did you take your $2,500 or do you fight it?
Well, and here's the interesting thing too. So a lot of people don't know this, and a lot of lawyers don't know this either, criminal lawyers especially, is that when you get into civil discovery, if they put requests for admissions, they can send you what's called requests for admissions, where you have to admit or deny under oath certain things. Well, guess what? You cannot plead the Fifth on those. The courts of appeals in Texas have ruled that you do not have the right to invoke a Fifth Amendment on requests for admissions that are sent out. So in a forfeiture case like this, you have to admit or deny to the very people who are going to investigate you for a crime.
Or they're going to deem the admissions, and you're going to be
Right.
But could you, in this, I haven't done civil work in a while, but years ago, and this is probably when they were riding horses up to the courthouse, but couldn't you put cannot
Unable.
admit or deny
Without
therefore
sufficient
deny?
information?
Yes.
Yes, you could.
Yes.
You could.
Did they do away with that yet? Or?
No, they haven't.
Okay.
They have not done away with that. But you know, it's an interesting dynamic, because even just in a car wreck case, you know, if you also have a simultaneous DWI investigation in a car wreck case, you have to answer your request for admissions. You can't plead the Fifth to them. It's a real quirk in the law.
And there's one thing that we all have kind of glossed over, but the truth of the matter is, on these type of cases, you have a very hard time getting competent representation.
You do.
I mean, how many of us, when they say, hey, we have a forfeiture that goes with this, and like, hey, I'm not interested in that at all, but call, and we have like 2 or 3 people we call, but there's no one who is trying to get, or no one who wants these cases. They're worse than workers' compensation cases.
Well, again, I think it goes back to the fact that if you don't have the money, look, they've seized all your assets, right? So if you've now paid a lawyer to help you on the criminal case, there's not a whole lot of people a whole lot of civil lawyers who are going to take a forfeiture case on a contingent fee. That's not really going to happen. And are you going to really be able to afford to pay that lawyer by the hour to fight the civil case?
And we've always taken them on a contingency fee, but they've been very large.
Right.
But the truth of the matter is, why would you, let's say you could get a decent civil lawyer for $150, $200 an hour, why would you pay them $30,000, $40,000 to get back a $20,000 automobile?
And not recover your attorney's fees?
Correct.
Because there's no right to recover that. If eventually the state is found to have wrongly seized your assets, oops, our bad. We get out of it, our mistake. They don't owe you your attorney's fees, your costs, nothing. It's just, you don't even get an apology letter.
No, it is a segment of aggrieved people that are tragically underrepresented.
Well, one of the things we didn't
Yeah.
talk about, though, is their motivation for seizing these assets. You know, their motivation is not necessarily to punish someone. They get to keep that money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They get to spend it how they want. You know, new guns, new cars, new bulletproof vests,
Body
margarita party.
Right.
Yeah, there's some states that they had talked about where it's an incentive. They let the law enforcement officers actually keep the cash. That was a point that I saw that was very interesting, and they said it and they labeled out the states. This Institute for Justice, they have like a map, and it's got all the states that like have I think there's only one state that has an A rating, which is Arizona. I think in Arizona, like, they're not going to touch your stuff, period. Everyone else has like D. I think Texas is a D+.
I'm surprised it was that high.
I said and that's where they go into this. It's now what Chris said is it's a profit motive scheme now. How much can we get? And that's, it's unfortunate for most of the states. I think there's 13 states that you have to have a conviction to have the forfeiture, but Texas ain't one of them.
So much for the presumption of innocence.
And how many times have you had a case where your client was pulled over and they said, oh, I had $2,500 cash on them, and then you go check the property log and there's $500 cash?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, that went into the police officer's retirement fund.
or no, the cash seized.
Or their dinner fund.
The cash seized because, a lot of the criminal defendants, at least in my practice, some of them don't have bank accounts. A lot of people carry cash because they do old school under the mattress. They don't trust banks. But when they're seized with that cash, that's their rent money, that's their expenses, that's their savings. But not only is it seized, but it was used in the furtherance of the criminal enterprise. they caught the kid with 2 grams of weed, but the $15,000 that his parents had saved in the next bedroom, they take that and say, oh, that's the profits from his massive, drug empire. And it's absolutely ridiculous. And so now you have to deal with that in an offense report, deal with that if it goes to trial. And, sometimes they'll use that to show, oh, there's also a distribution network, or there's some type of, in a few cases, it's caused an enhancement in the charge.
Yeah.
Not baggies, not scales, just a lot of money. He's a dealer.
Right.
And we have to deal with that.
Like I said, so much for the presumption of innocence. I mean, this is some tough stuff to deal with. Randy, you mentioned body cams. I want to talk about this woman in Minnesota who was shot this week, and mysteriously the body cams did not get turned on. She was shot by police. She had called the police because she heard what she thought was a disturbance, I believe, in the alleyway.
Sexual assault.
Yeah, behind her residence. And so she was out in her pajamas at 11:30 at night, and she gets shot by the very police she calls to come and aid the call. No body cameras. The body cameras either did not go on, did not activate, or the police intentionally turned them off. And there's also no audio, so that the dash cam did not even pick up the audio of the incident. Yet again, now, obviously, the difference here with a lot of the police shootings that we've talked about in this case and that we see in the news, it's a white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman. And so I don't know that it changes things, but it seems to certainly have at least gotten a lot more people's attention from what I can tell.
Oh, without a doubt. Of course, that dynamic has completely changed things. And what is even more unusual is that the way that things were set up. It's almost incomprehensible how it happened. Apparently she was leaning over the driver's side talking to this officer's partner, and he shot her in the car.
Yeah, through the car.
Yes, through the car, yes.
It's bizarre. I mean, the story, there doesn't seem to be a very good explanation at this point for how this happened. Zero explanation.
Well, haven't you ever been robbed by a woman in the middle of the night in her pajamas? That's
with an Australian accent?
Yes, I thought there was a rash of those going on.
Well, and you just touched on it, the Australian accent. It's international. She has dual citizenship. Her dad was American, I believe, and her mom's Australian. So she's got dual citizenship. Australia has some of the toughest gun laws known to mankind. I don't think that they even have guns.
They don't.
There. They have no gun crime to speak of, and she gets shot in America.
Yeah, well, and the Australian papers have just been hammering America at this point over their gun laws. Now, I'm not really one to talk because I own a ton of guns, as I know both of you do.
Making sure.
But yeah, right, making sure you didn't come in. But I don't think this is so much of a gun control issue as it is an improper police training issue.
If you have to think about just from tactics and how police officers are trained, and I go back to my military experience in the Marine Corps, the first thing you have is target identification. Before you fire that weapon, you need to know what you're shooting at. But what's most alarming here is from where the shot was taken. Left-handed or right-handed shooter, he is sitting in a patrol car. Those duty belts are so far back and they're usually like level 3 type security holsters with multiple, to essentially manipulate your holster to pull that weapon and to go across in the way that, it's almost as if he already had his weapon out in his hand and he went straight. It's like you said, something just does not make sense here, and
well, I don't
the
think
fact that
that
they're
we have
not
any
even
statements.
talking about it. Yeah, no one was.
Yeah, no
Are you
statements.
kidding me? I'm one of the biggest proponents of the Fifth Amendment. Because I know how things. Everyone here knows how words can be misconstrued, and how the public can take those when they don't see the evidence. They're not privy to that. But here, it's cut and dry. Man, come on, man, tell us what's going on. Before something bad happens, because it's coming.
Well, and you touched on it, Mark. I mean, just with the the way this guy did it, I mean, he fires across his partner through the driver's side window. I mean, it's just such poor judgment.
If it's an accident, then it's an accident. But we need to come out and say this was a horrible accident.
Yeah.
This was a mistake in judgment, because that, I'd hate to think, and I honestly don't think there's a police officer on duty that woke up that morning and said, I'm going to go out there and kill a white girl tonight, and any way I can. Obviously, that be very difficult to believe. But if you don't come out and say, you fall on your sword, I screwed up, we're going to have this whole gender, this whole race, this whole religion, conspiracy theories going on. They're already talking about, I think I saw an article with him, said something about some, what was it, some type of African, Somali police unit organization thing, and they're going into this guy's background, and they're going to try to link him to some type of, fundamentalist group or faith-based group that now he's, anti-white, and that's just not the case. I think this was just a foobar, but hey, come on with it, because if not, it's going to get bad.
Well, and I'm going to break for just a minute and let y'all know we're opening up the phone lines. We've reached the halfway point of the program. 713-807-17 is the 94 is the number. If you want to jump in and talk with Mark, Chris, Rand, or myself, call us up. But I hear what you're saying, but to me, you look at, for instance, Philando Castile, same state, Minnesota. Okay. We talked about that. The video that came out, the officer was acquitted in that trial recently. And you watch the video, and I'm with you, Mark. I don't think that officer, and nor do I think the officer in this situation, set out with the mindset, I'm going to go kill this person that night. It's clear when you look at the video, and there we had a dash cam video to look at. I mean, the officer, whether it was trumped up or not, I don't know. But it certainly seemed like a genuine reaction that I saw of, oh my God, I can't believe I just did this. But it also, you see how quickly he was just to pull the trigger. And it's like, I understand they're put in a real difficult position. Late at night, you don't know what's going on. I mean, I'm sure we all would be in a similar state of mind, but I mean, it just seems to me that the fundamental problem is a lack of training with controlling your reaction to some of this stuff.
Well, it's incomprehensible that it happened when you are just given the basic storyline that she called about an assault, a sexual assault. They're there to help a woman who may or may not have been sexually assaulted.
I thought she was calling in another attack.
Whatever it may
way-
be,
either
but
way,
it's a
there
woman
might-
that was
Yes.
attacked.
Yeah.
Either way.
Or
And
could have been.
And now you have this woman in her pajamas, and you shoot her? Do you think that she assaulted someone? What, I don't understand.
You're
It's completely incomprehensible.
You might not be looking for your suspect could be anybody, but your victim, statistically in your mind, is going to be a female. And you see a female dressed that way, you automatically think victim, not
Assailant.
Perpetrator.
big crazy me coming up,
Yeah.
smashing the glass.
And not only that, but the other thing is, why would you, if you believe she was truly a victim, and it's unclear to me whether the window was down or whether it was up and he actually shot through the glass, but if it's down, why would you let that person, if they were suspicious in the first place, approach your car? That's where it gets back to what is the training that's going on here? I mean, clearly she wasn't a threat that you didn't feel threatened to have her approach the car and begin a conversation with her.
So many variables, so many issues that we don't know, that no one knows, and no one's talking. There's no statements from the officers. There's no investigation reports right now. So there's so many unknowns that it's all guess.
It's rank speculation at best. I mean, his only saving grace is, for some reason, as Mark mentioned, his gun was already out, and he accidentally misfired. Yeah. I mean, otherwise it's just...
He meant to maybe say, hey, back off,
or maybe he just took it off for some reason. It was bothering him in the car and placed it in his lap or on the side, or I mean, something like that. But that's the only thing that even halfway makes sense.
Yeah, I carry. I conceal carry, but when I drive, I don't carry when I drive.
Right.
It's jamming into my side. And
Exactly.
I take it out, put it out. When I get out, I put it back in. And that may be the case. And maybe she ran up to the car real fast to say, hey guys, the screaming's back here. It's over there. And it startled him, and he meant to say, hey, get back or to defend himself, and it was a misfire. But you got to come out and say this, because if not, you're not doing anybody, let alone yourself, any favors. And there are going to be people out there, other police officers, brother officers of yours, that are going to pay the price because of some vigilante move or some Ferguson riot and these other, what happened in Dallas with the assassinations.
Right.
Some guys are going to get, because the public, is going to run with it. They're going to spin it. And so you need to come out and let us know what's going on, or else, it's your own kind that's going to, pay the price for this. And so just like anything in life, it's the miscommunication, it's the misperception that skews everything. So,
Absolutely.
if you screwed up, come and say that.
Yeah.
Let us know what's going on.
We got our first phone call coming in, so I want to hop over to the phone lines. Hello, thanks for calling Reasonable Doubt.
Hello, I enjoy y'all show.
Thank you.
I just want to make a comparison. It's the same thing as the officer that reached over and shot that guy when he was sitting in the car with the girlfriend and the baby in the back seat. And it seemed like to me all they're going to say was they feared for their life.
Yep, that's what we were just talking about. That, I mean, it's absolutely the same thing. I mean, it's and thanks for the call, by the way.
Okay.
It is. Look, I get it. I mean, I understand it's a high-stress job. You're out there, but this was. The facts are different from most of these scenarios where you're approaching a car, you don't know what the occupants on the car, you can't see what's going on. I mean, in this situation, from what I can tell, from the limited amount of information we had, they had to at least see her approaching the vehicle. Otherwise, they wouldn't have talked to her. I don't know, man. I mean, it's a very disturbing trend that's going on, and it's continued. And I don't know if this will change anything. What you haven't seen is yet, and I don't know if we will or won't see it, you haven't seen any mass protests at this point.
No, you have not. But one of the things that is happening, though, despite all these just horrible, horrific shootings, the numbers aren't going down. In fact, I believe they're going up.
Well, and they're certainly getting publicized more.
Yes.
That's for sure. I mean, with the other incidents that we referred to and that the caller referred to, that whole thing was filmed on Facebook. It was put on Facebook Live.
Yeah, the girlfriend, she went live on her phone right after the shooting.
Yeah, and so I think social media is changing a lot of this too.
Well, the phone is changing everything.
Yeah.
Where
The fact that you have access to a high definition camera is changing. Although I still don't know, even with the advent of this, I still get grainy videos and photos from people. I don't understand that. It's like, how can you screw up with the technology you have at hand?
you're older than all your friends. That technology came along when you were middle aged.
Chris gets them all the time. I see the girls he shows me, and they're grainy and they're blurry, but I tell him, I was like, no, it's not bad camera, that's called filters. Filters.
Well, look, I hope we get some more information on this. I'd like to be able to talk about this with more information and not just speculation. It would certainly help facilitate our conversation on this show, and I think just in general about these incidents overall.
But it is like something that would happen with untrained, unskilled people who found a weapon.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like the rest of them where you go, this is just some officer who snapped or made a bad judgment call or maybe maliciously shot someone.
Right.
This is just, it's incomprehensible. They're all incomprehensible. This one's particularly bad.
We'll talk about something else that's incomprehensible. The use of jailhouse snitches. I think we've probably all had a case where one has been used, and it seems like each time the stories just get more and more outlandish of what they're willing to testify to. The state of Texas has now tried to pass some legislation to limit the use of jailhouse snitches. I don't know that this legislation is necessarily going to end that practice, though. I think there's just still too much incentive for prosecutors to use it, despite the legislature's desire. I think the problem is that the courts have never really slapped prosecutors' hands for doing this, for using jailhouse snitches.
Well, look how unreliable the largest cause of false convictions, eyewitness testimony, faulty eyewitness testimony. And they've really done nothing to address this problem, and this is only a fraction of that. But no, unfortunately, it's sometimes you need to, the mentality is, take what you have, whether it's, regardless of what it is, if it helps get the ball across the line.
Yeah, and in the last case I had, that we had a jailhouse snitch in, we actually had a mistrial. And the jailhouse snitch, while he was on the witness list for the mistrial, for the original trial that was that we had, the court ruled there was a mistrial because of failure to turn over some evidence. We go to the second trial. He's still on the witness list, but 2 days before trial, the government hands over the statements that they didn't hand over in the first trial. So,
The statements they didn't have in the first trial.
Correct.
Oh, I'll go out and say it.
Exactly.
Sue me.
I mean that's the thing. It just they go in and they find witnesses who will say whatever. These guys have such a motive to get out, to say whatever. And we all cross-examine snitches, but jailhouse snitches are the worst.
Well, you're dealing with a witness that they will call a liar in one case, and then a truth sayer in the next case.
Yeah.
Well, which is he? It's bizarre, and this is the same prosecutor that will put him away and then use them the next day. Mm-hmm. How did he somehow become so credible?
That's the amazing thing to me. I mean, they will get up there, they will prop these guys up, and they will say, well, you're just not credible. So here's what we're gonna deal with you this first time, And so, assuming they try to do a plea bargain, and in the federal system, they debrief with these guys, unlike the state system. And the state system, I think there's how we can kind of work out to let the audience kind of know some of these differences. In the state system, they don't really have kind of the proffer session before a trial to kind of figure out what's going on. I mean, it's a pure jailhouse snitch where it is a guy on the inside who may send a letter to a prosecutor saying, hey, I got information, trying to work a deal off. And by comparison, typically what happens in a federal case, at least the scenarios I've seen, you may have some of that where an inmate writes to a prosecutor or an agent and says, I have information on so-and-so, but more often than not, what happens is when everybody's in pretrial detention awaiting the trial, when everybody's trying to cut deals, all of a sudden somebody will say, oh, well, I remember so-and-so, number 5 on the indictment, he told me this when we were in the cell block together. And so, but at its core, this is just nothing but bought and paid for testimony.
And that's why, even if I have a problem with this, the basic fundamental of the name, of the label. Like, there's a lot of people who don't think that we should call our clients defendants. And I've never said defendant in trial. I always say, this is John or this is Rachel. I've even had the state object to me calling them by their first name, which is that's a whole nother thing right there. But you're not a witness. You didn't witness. You're an overhearer or something. But just how a lot of people, the late Judge Sandy Bilstein in Fort Bend County, County Court 4, he never allowed anyone to call the defendant a defendant. It was the citizen accused, because he thought defendant is in of itself damning. You're not a defendant, you're the citizen accused. Just like here, when I think a jury, someone hears, this is a witness, this is a witness, it doesn't have to be an eyewitness or a fact witness, but the name witness, even before we start talking about the issue of this, I just have a problem with them being, it's almost like I want to object to them because it's not a witness. That is someone you paid off to lie. And who cares what they heard?
Yeah.
It's how did they hear it, in what subject, what context? None of that matters to these prosecutors. They just take black and white, phrases and automatically use that as evidence of guilt, which is I mean, I called one a puppet in trial one time, and I almost got threatened to be held in contempt because I refused. I come, so you're just their puppet, Mr. Metzger.
What bothers me the most is, sure, we get the ability to cross-examine as the defense lawyer. We can cross-examine their plea agreement, what deal they cut, if they're getting money in exchange for their testimony, because some of them do get paid as undercovers or something. So we get the ability to cross-examine them on those things, okay? What I really have a fundamental problem with, and I liken it to, for instance, an expert situation, okay? Experts in the criminal system get away with far more than they do in the civil system, obviously. But, at least with an expert, the court at least has to make the determination on the reliability of the testimony, right? There is no such determination by the court on the reliability of these guys' testimonies that's been bought and paid for before they let the jury hear it. It's just, it goes to, the court just basically say, well, that's for the jury to decide whether they're credible.
But you're trying to equate that to scientific bought and paid for testimony.
Yeah.
Where these people, they consider them just another fact witness. But what bothers me the most is what lengths the state will go to, in some cases, to hide what the actual deal is.
Oh, absolutely.
Where literally you need to, it's almost like playing Battleship to ask the right question to figure out what their compensation is or what the deal is, or for those of us who have even represented someone who has cooperated with the state, what great lengths they will go to bury what the actual deal is. Like, we're not promising you anything, but.
Yeah. But I mean, I get back to the reliability thing, because all the state or the government has to do is basically get up there and talk about in jury selection itself and say, well, you're going to hear from some witnesses who have done this, that, or the other, and we don't choose our witnesses, and they'll come back to that in closing. We don't get to choose our witnesses. Well, yeah, you do. You chose this person. You gave them a deal. You gave them remuneration for their testimony. You did choose them.
Which goes to what Rand was saying, is they're not going to tell us. They try to hide it. They even lie about it in some trials I've been a part of where, they did this on their own. There was no compensation paid. And after the trial, we find out that prosecutor cut the check, was part of the reason checks were cut. You lied to us. You lied on the record in a court of law as a prosecutor about compensation because they want to take that out of our mouths. They don't want to give us that in voir dire. They don't want to give us that in closing argument to where we can say exactly what you just said, Jimmy, which is, no, actually they can choose. They did choose in this case, and which I think is a motivation for what Rand was touching on as far as hiding the ball, or in some cases just flat out lying about it. And when they're uncovered, nothing happens.
Yeah,
Going back to what you said earlier on that other point, they can do these things, and when they're caught, when they're brought out, nothing happens. In fact, they probably get promoted, and then later down the day, we'll find out there'll be an asset forfeiture case because there'll be an AUSA one day, because apparently that's what happens.
It's the promotion. Well, I mean, so this law requires them to, quote, keep thorough records of their jailhouse informants that they use, the nature of their testimony, the benefits they received, and all their criminal history, and the information must be disclosed to defense lawyers. Okay? Great. That's all this legislation does. That, to me, again, it doesn't change the fact that the courts are not going to, and have not done anything, to hammer these people for not having done that.
Well, what are your benefits received? The fact that you didn't get charged with a crime, maybe you did something and you didn't get charged for it, is that a benefit received? Absolutely. Is that going to be recorded anywhere? No. No one's going to write that down. No one's going to say, I didn't charge him for.
Yeah.
They're not going to do that.
Yeah.
So you'll never have an idea of how many times this witness has received benefits for their testimony.
Right. I mean, what are you going to do if he's working a case or helping them out, and he's continually putting himself in situations where he's violating the? Are they going to record every time he violates the terms of his cooperation deal or whatever, and puts himself in a situation where he could have gotten arrested again, like you said, and they choose and say, oh no, don't arrest that guy. He's our help. We can't have him dirtied up on it.
Or I've had them where they've been charged, as a first degree, and well, maybe we'll knock it down to a third by the time we come around to getting rid of your case.
Yeah.
And you'll never find that out.
No. I don't think this law is actually going to change anything.
And
I really don't.
And but think about this, Michael Morton, which was supposed to be, really help us level the field. When they violate Michael Morton, what happens to them? Unless it's just super egregious and it ends up in an appellate opinion, nothing happens.
Don't do that again.
Some disciplinary training, maybe an extra class, a memo.
Maybe a memo to the file.
Because all of us
It doesn't make it to the file.
all of us have been in trial in the last year where evidence has been referred to or mentioned, or a hearing, a motion to suppress, or a PSI, where it's the first time we heard that evidence.
Yeah.
I had that issue on Tuesday morning in Harris County. I almost had to Brady myself. I'm like, do you guys know about this stuff? They're like, you sure you want to go to trial? Like, and blank faces, they legitimately, I was like, well, I'm going to Brady you kinda so you can Brady me back on this stuff that there's no reason why you shouldn't have this. And I think it was because there was a prior prosecutor, the ball was dropped, they hid something, the new guy didn't find out about it, he was like, and I guess they didn't think we keep good files or something. But, as that prosecutor, probably it was not in that court anymore because guess what? Promoted up. So.
Yeah, exactly.
And we know that, on both the defense side and on the same side as the prosecutors, there's people who, some dig with a bulldozer to find out what's going on, and some are out there with their little bucket and shovel just barely scraping what's going on. Because I don't know how many times I've started, or we're getting ready to start a trial, you go, I'm sorry, I don't have everything I should have on your officer. Is there anything else out there? And it's like, let us check, and oops.
Yeah. That's exactly what happened in that trial where I had the mistrial and they brought the jailhouse snitch in.
Yeah.
Is when we had the mistrial, we're sitting there reading offense reports and we discover, hey, wait, there's interview tapes that they're referring to in these just recently produced, addendums. We never got these. It's crazy stuff. All right, I want to scratch the last topic because I don't really care about it.
Okay, scratched it is.
I want to go off.
You realize 3 out of 4 lawyers at this table have had heart attacks. Keep the blood pressure low.
That's what I want to talk about because we only got 4 minutes left. So I know that you two were there today, and this was an event that you sponsored or started with the help of Judge Goodhart to get everybody trained in a CPR class. You had you had a death experience.
I checked out for 8 minutes, yes.
And you came back to life with the help of some paramedics. You literally dropped over in the middle of the Houston Marathon.
Yes, at mile 15, I had a massive heart attack, as it turned out, despite my healthy lifestyle. In fact, quite like Chris. I dropped dead at mile 15, and I was very fortunate. There were 6 people, 5 of them medical professionals, and 1 gentleman who owned a computer company who all knew CPR and gave me CPR for 8 minutes and saved my life. And the best part is there's no brain damage, so I didn't wake up and go build that wall or anything like that.
I'm going to ask your wife to make sure that there's no brain damage.
Well, of course she's going to say there's brain damage.
Well, they had a defibrillator, right?
They did. I had the good fortune of dropping dead near a nursing home that happened to have a defibrillator there, an AED there.
So you guys put on a class today to try and teach everybody about CPR. I saw some of the pictures posted. I was unable to make it today, but tell us a little bit about the event.
I mean, how many people do we have there? About 50?
We had 35 or 36 out of the 49 who signed up, which is great for lawyers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The commitment level sometimes is problematic.
Well, everyone there ended up being certified in CPR, adult and infant CPR, Heimlich maneuver, everything. It was very empowering knowledge to have. My ex-wife's a school teacher, and she told me that she has to get certified every 2 years. And for her, she thinks it's kind of frightening to have that knowledge. But for me, it was very empowering to have that knowledge and be able to potentially save someone like our friend Rand here, or myself. I mean, I had 4 heart attacks in 3 days, so you just never know.
No, to give someone the chance to go home again, because I thought of all those times I got for a long run by myself with just whichever way the wind blew me. And apparently with the pre-existing problems I had that I was unaware of, I could have dropped dead anywhere and been alone and died a very lonely, sad, pathetic death. But fortunately, there were 6 people there who went through the training who responded immediately.
I mean, the scary thing is we're all in a high stress job. You know, we talked about the stress situation that the cops may be under, but you know, I think a lot of our stress is self-inflicted every day because we just put so much on ourselves between dealing with our clients, wanting to get the right result. We're in an antagonistic system, and then we're also trying to balance a family life as well. But the scary thing for me is, like with you, Rand, I mean, you're one of the healthiest guys I know.
I thought I was one of the healthiest guys I knew as well. I mean, I was a long distance runner. I was a vegan. I've been really taking care of myself my whole adult life. And I went to the doctor regularly. You all know how neurotic I am. You have a good idea. So believe me, it was a bigger shock. It was a bigger shock to me than it was to anyone else.
Do you think it has anything to do with the profession, or is it just a genetic thing? What do you think?
I think it's predominantly genetics, but I think it's also, I got rid of 2 big cases. One, the trial started the Tuesday after Thanksgiving, and the other one was a terrible case involving a child that died, 15,000 pages of CPS records, and it was just a PSI hearing that was incredibly stressful. So I think that certainly exacerbated poor genetics.
Well, I'm glad all 3 of y'all are still with us and could come on this program. I mean, I think what you did today with the CPR program, huge. I mean, I really wish I could have been there, because I remember taking the CPR class before my first child was born, and like you said, it was very impactful. So.
Well, you can
big props to you guys.
This one's called the first annual. Hopefully you can make the second one.
Hope so. That's all the time we have for tonight, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a quick hour, but I appreciate Mark Metzger, Chris Carlson, and Ram Mintz for joining me tonight. Guys,
Thank you.
Have to have you back on the program.
Oh, my pleasure.
We will be back next week, ladies and gentlemen, with an all-new episode. Julio will be back. At least that's what he represents to me, unless he has a little bit of a hangover from tonight's soccer game. But we will see you next week. Please go check out our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter for the latest updates, the news stories, and what the topics for next week's show will be. For Jimmy Ardwan, myself, for Julio, who is not here, for all my guests, good night, ladies and gentlemen.